Threads is no longer just trying to be another social app. Meta is trying to turn it into the operating system for public conversation. That sounds bigger than a milestone post, but look closely at what Meta has actually been building into Threads and the pattern becomes hard to miss. Yes, the headline number matters. On June 16, 2026, Meta said Threads reached 500 million monthly active users. That is a very large platform, but if you focus only on the number, you miss the more interesting story. The real story is structural. Threads is being shaped around communities, real-time moments, algorithm controls, and even connections to people outside the app through the fediverse. Put those together and Meta is making a very specific bet about what the public internet still needs. It needs a text layer that feels alive. That might sound strange in a world dominated by short video creators and recommendation engines, but text still does something video does not do as cleanly. Text is fast. Text is reactive. Text is easy to join. Text is where people gather when they want to track a game, a launch, a scandal, a meme, a breaking story, or a niche obsession in real time without needing to produce full content themselves. That is the lane Threads is trying to own. And the smartest part of the strategy is that Meta does not seem to be treating Threads as one monolithic feed. It is treating it as a system for organizing public attention. Start with the community's push. In the June 16 update, Meta did not just announce that more people are using Threads. It said communities are one of the fastest growing features on the app and moved them out of beta. That matters because communities are a different organizing principle from the old social graph. The old model says, follow people, then let the platform decide which of their posts matter. The community model says, start with the topic, then let people gather around the topic whether or not they already know each other. That is a subtle but important shift. If the internet increasingly feels interest-driven instead of friend-driven, then communities become the natural home screen for public conversation. Not because people care less about creators or personalities, but because most live internet behavior starts with a subject. The NBA game, the movie release, the AI launch, the neighborhood issue, the parenting question, the music fandom, the travel hack. The category comes first, then the people inside it start to matter. That is why Meta adding a communities hub, community icons, local language support, progress indicators, and champion recognition is more strategic than it sounds. Those features are not cosmetic. They are an attempt to make public conversation feel navigable. Instead of one endless river of posts, Threads wants to feel more like a network of rooms where people know why they are there. And once you build rooms, the next challenge is deciding how people experience them. That is where Dear Algo and your Algo come in. Most platforms still treat recommendations like a black box. They may give you mute buttons, likes, follows, or broad preferences, but the experience still often feels like the algorithm is doing something to you rather than with you. Meta is trying to soften that relationship on Threads. In February 2026, it launched Dear Algo, a feature that lets people publicly tell the system what they want to see more or less of for a limited time. The examples were simple, but the logic is bigger. During a live NBA game, maybe you want more basketball. During a TV finale you have not watched yet, maybe you want less spoiler chatter. During an album release, maybe you want to drown in fan reaction for 3 days and then move on. That is a more event-shaped idea of recommendations. Instead of assuming identity is fixed, the system acknowledges that attention moves in waves. People do not care about the same things every day. They care intensely about certain things for short periods of time. Then they switch. That is very internet-native behavior. The June 16 update then built on that with your Algo, which brings a more private control layer into the same philosophy. In other words, Meta is not just optimizing the feed behind the scenes. It is slowly teaching users that the feed can be steered. That matters because control is becoming part of the product story. For years, people have complained that social feeds feel manipulative, repetitive, or impossible to tune. A platform that can make people feel more agency without making the experience harder could gain a real advantage, especially in text, where the value of the feed depends heavily on whether the conversation feels current and relevant rather than stale and noisy. That leads directly to live chats. If communities are the rooms and algorithm controls are the steering wheel, live chats are Meta's answer to the oldest magic of the internet, being there while something is happening. In April 2026, Threads introduced live chats as public group chats built around major moments. The launch example was the NBA playoffs, complete with live scores, countdowns, polls, typing indicators, and visible host signals. On paper, that sounds like another feature. In practice, It reveals how Meta thinks public conversation actually works. When a big event is unfolding, people do not only want polished creator posts after the fact, they want the shared pulse. They want to react, joke, argue, agree, overreact, and watch other people overreact. They want a social soundtrack running in parallel with the event itself. That is one reason text platforms remain stubbornly important. Video can dominate entertainment, but text often dominates simultaneity. You watch the game on one screen and track the conversation on another. You follow the keynote stream, but the text feed tells you what the internet thinks the moment something lands. You watch the finale, but the quote posts, jokes, spoilers, and fan theories make the event feel communal. Meta clearly wants Threads to be the place where that second screen energy lives. And if it works, that gives the app something deeper than monthly user bragging rights. It gives it behavioral importance. A platform becomes hard to replace when users feel they need it during moments that matter. That is also why the fediverse story is more important than it looks. One of the hardest things about building a public conversation platform is that users hate the feeling of being trapped in a small room. If the network feels closed, conversations can feel repetitive. If the same personalities dominate every lane, the product feels narrow. If important voices live elsewhere, users feel the limits. Meta's fediverse work is an attempt to answer that. In June 2025, Threads added easier ways to see federated posts, including a dedicated fediverse feed and direct search for fediverse users. Meta also said Threads had interacted with more than 75% of all fediverse servers 1 year after launching sharing. Whether or not that becomes a mainstream behavior for most users, the strategic point is clear. Threads wants to feel bigger than Threads. That is a powerful framing shift. Instead of saying, come here and ignore the rest of the open social web, Meta is at least partly saying, come here and still keep a window into it. There are obvious limits. Meta still controls the product. The experience is still designed inside Meta's incentives. But the fediverse layer helps Threads look less like a sealed app and more like a hub. And hubs matter. The winning public platform is often not the one that owns every conversation directly. It is the one that makes the most important conversations easiest to find, join, and keep following. That is why this matters to creators and media companies too. For creators, Threads offers something many video-first platforms do not: a low-friction place to think in public every day. Not every update should be a full video. Not every audience touchpoint needs editing, production, or thumbnails. Sometimes a creator needs a live reaction layer, an opinion layer, a testing ground layer, or a room where a community can talk back in real time. For publishers and media brands, the logic is similar. Text remains one of the best surfaces for headlines, framing, context, and real-time distribution. If Threads becomes the place where public curiosity gathers before people click, watch, or subscribe, then it becomes strategically useful even if it is not the final destination. For brands and marketers, the value is attention density. A community-centered text platform can tell you not only what people like, but what they are actively discussing right now, how long they stay in the conversation, and which moments turn into recurring culture instead of one-day noise. That is commercial gold if the platform can keep it usable. Of course, there are real risks. The first is sameness. Recommendation systems are good at amplifying what already works. Communities can create belonging, but they can also create repetition. Live chats can feel alive, but they can also feel chaotic. If Threads over-optimizes for engagement without protecting freshness, the product can collapse into predictable loops very quickly. The second risk is moderation pressure. A platform built around public conversation during live moments invites speed, conflict, misinformation, dogpiles, and emotional escalation. The more central Threads becomes during breaking events, the harder the trust and safety problem gets. The third risk is strategic ambiguity. Meta wants Threads to feel open enough to be interesting, controlled enough to be safe, personalized enough to be useful, and communal enough to be fun. Those goals fit together sometimes. They also fight each other. The more open the conversation, the harder it is to control. The more controlled the experience, the less alive it may feel. That balancing act is the whole game. But if Meta gets enough of it right, the payoff is significant. Threads could become the layer people instinctively reach for when they want the internet to feel current, social, and organized around what matters right now. Not the place where every piece of content begins and ends. Not the place where every creator does their deepest work. Not the place where every community lives forever. But the place where public attention gets sorted in real time. That is why the 500 million number matters less as a trophy, and more as evidence that the underlying product thesis might be working. The thesis is simple. Communities organize interest. Algorithm controls make the feed feel stable. Live chats make major moments feel shared. The fediverse makes the network feel larger than one app. Put those together and Thread starts looking less like a side product and more like infrastructure for the public internet. And in a world where every platform wants to own your video time, that may be exactly why a smart